And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network. Be sure to subscribe to our feed, Tiger Territory, wherever you get your podcasts. I am Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who would gladly donate his hamstring to Dak Prescott right now. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Ooh, doing all right. It's quickly become a depressing football season for me between the esteemed Oklahoma State Cowboys and the Dallas Cowboys. So hope all you Lions fans out there are enjoying this. I might convert over to Lionsism for the rest of this season here.
There you go. We'll see if the people think that's a good or a bad thing. On to some good stuff, some award news. Cody, we'll get the easy one out of the way. Tarik Skubal, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was named Tiger of the Year by the Detroit chapter of the Baseball Writers Association of America. That is, of course, something that you are a part of, and he was unanimous selection. So I would say reveal your ballot, but it seems pretty straightforward there. Was that one of your easiest? Because you do have other awards that you vote on, both with the team and then nationally. Was that one of your easier? And you just voted in a presidential election, no politics, but the voting did just happen. So was that the easiest vote you've had this fall?
Yeah, easiest this fall and easiest in my short history voting for Tiger of the Year as well. I mean, there have been a couple years where it's fairly clear cut, but none quite like this. Like last season was hard. It was like no one quite stood out. Probably the best player was Eduardo Rodriguez, but he was hurt and missed time and then wasn't as good in the second half. So, people voted for Spencer Torkelson last year, which we talked about before. I did not vote for Tork last year. But this year, you send 1, 2. So it was like, all right, 1 is Skubal. 2, nope, not very hard either. Riley Green. All right, we're done here. And I think I was happiest that Skubal was a unanimous selection because there have also been some wonky votes from the Detroit BBWA chapter we would see over the years. Miguel Cabrera get some random honorary votes and just kind of some strange stuff, I think, pop out, because this chapter, it does include the core beat writers, but you also got Mitch Albom is still part of the chapter and some old heads, who I'm sure are very respected writers, but haven't covered a Major League Baseball game in 15, 20 years. So I'm a little bit sensitive about how this award gets voted on sometimes. I was very pleased to see no one overthought it. No one got cute. Skubal, unanimous selection.
Yeah, I mean, there was, sometimes every now and then you get those people that's like, well, I'm just always going to go with a positional player.
Right. That. I thought maybe that could happen.
And you just have one vote. I mean, there's only one guy who's been unanimous, right, in the Hall of Fame, right? So, you just get...
Don't get me started on that one either.
You just, it happens, So, I was kind of curious whether that'd be the case. It was not. That's okay. But it did get me thinking, because we're going to be talking about Skubal here next week sometime and for a much bigger award. And Scott Harris talked about it this past week in San Antonio for GM meetings. The Skubal extension thing. So should they sign Skubal to an extension? That's not necessarily where I want to go right now. What I want to say is, where is the higher motivation for a Skubal extension? Because I think both sides have compelling arguments for either side. Number one, Tigers, it would be a great kind of propelling the momentum of the season into next season. You have your face of the franchise locked up for, however many years. But then there's also injury risk. And he's already kind of gone through it in his time in the major league. So that's obvious. That's obvious. For Skubal, you have had injuries. So this sets you up for life. This sets you up for life, getting the extension that he would be, eligible for is the wrong phrasing, but, that he would garner. And that would be great. However, to use an economic term, price is always going to go up. So he is technically he could be, quote, losing money. Now, no one's going to cry about it, but he would be technically losing money if he didn't go another year that when he was dominant, even like go into his contract year, basically. Like his price, should he maintain health, will only go up. So I was kind of curious your thoughts about, like, not necessarily should they agree to it, because we could talk about that hypothetical forever. But who has the larger motivation to try to do something like that this offseason?
Yeah, the comments came out from Scott Boras at GM meetings as well, and it was kind of like, yeah, we'll maybe talk about that. Like, seemed very, non-committal. I think if one party is more motivated, it has to be the Detroit Tigers, and the arguments are there for maybe reasons Skubal should be interested in this. But again, Boras is not a risk-averse agent. He is not seeing the world so much in, like, what if he gets hurt? He is most likely advising Skubal how much higher the ceiling for any potential deal could be if he wins back-to-back Cy Youngs, wins 3 Cy Youngs in a row. Like, he is playing for the ceiling, and which sets the market then for all of Scott Boras's other players and players in the rest of the league. That is a very intentional thing. For the Tigers, we still don't know for sure. I mean, Scott Harris has kind of been like, oh, yeah, we want to, keep young talent or whatever, but he hasn't been super forthright on this topic either. We don't know for sure that the Tigers are comfortable extending any pitcher 7, 8, 9, 10 years because the inherent risk that comes with that too. But if I had to choose one party, I'm choosing the Tigers, because how many more teams were as dependent on one player as the Detroit Tigers? And a pitcher who only throws once every 5 days. But in terms of singular importance to a team this past season, I mean, I'd say Bobby Witt Jr. with the Royals, and there's not a ton else coming to mind. I mean, the Tigers need Skubal, and although they do have other young talent and the organization is in a good spot and producing more talent, their success right now is still very dependent on him and his presence and his health. And so if I have to choose one, I think the Tigers will have more incentive to do a deal here.
And as I often do, I remind people of players' ages, and he is about to turn 28 years old. Yeah, he's about to turn 28 years old. So forever that's worth. You would like to think that he's one of the guys that you would like to bet on to make that extension, worth it or whatever, but it's baseball, it's pitchers. I think you bring up a great point in the sense that we have no idea whether they think it's a needed deal. Like, they
Right.
being the Tigers organization, they could very well raise this. You know what I mean? Just be like, all right, we maxed out this asset, and we're going to move on and use these other assets and, rinse and repeat. For all we know, that could be a thing. So from a fan's point of view, you want to have guys like Skubal locked up for a long time and make him sort of the face of your franchise, and a guy that's going to represent your franchise on promotional materials, all-star games and video games and all that stuff. But Scott Harris has kept basically everything, including this, close to the vest. And I will say congrats to the national media that are interviewing Scott Harris probably for the first or second time, and having to deal with his non-committal nature. That's how he is. It's not personal. We had him on the podcast too, and he was like that. And Cody's talked to him several times, and he's like that. Then I mean, that's how he's going to operate. He's never going to try to put himself in a corner verbally, like that, don't like that, whatever. That's how he's going to be. So I think if this was a Mike Ilitch team, he would be extended, because Mike tended to value sort of those sentimental reasons that we said, why sign somebody, for better or for worse. But that was kind of how he operated. Again, we also don't know how Chris views stuff like this, because we're talking about so much uncharted territory with this franchise. Chris is like that as well. So very fascinating. I I would be curious what people think. You can hit us up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran_Steckley. Pod page is at Tiger Territory _. Tell us what you think. Where is the greater motivation for the Tigers to, or for a potential extension between the Tigers and Skubal?
Looking for recipes to bring the autumn feels? Hello, have you tried HelloFresh yet? America's #1 meal kit gives you over 50 recipes to choose from. Each week, they pre-portion the ingredients and then they ship them right to your doorstep.
Picky eaters like Scott or people looking to fit a specific lifestyle have met their match. HelloFresh features preferences like fit and wholesome, quick and easy, or vegetarian. HelloFresh helps me eat healthier and maintain my presence as a popular chef at home with my kids. I'm bringing variety to the dinner table.
Just stop with the endless recipe searching, or you're spending a whole bunch of money on a big jar of spices just for a pinch. That's all you need. You can also get step-by-step recipe cards, making cooking simpler by using HelloFresh.
Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/freeFT. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/freeFT.
Moving on to another award season special. The Tigers had, for a team that had the reputation of, they have no bats and they're, this hokey pitching bullpen day stuff with one good pitcher, Skubal thing. Tigers had 2 nominations for the Silver Slugger. So that would be Riley Green and Colt Keith. Riley Green continues to earn the accolades that will kind of get him into, higher conversation. I talked about that from the first time, technically, that I was part of the Foul Territory Network with AJ and Eric, where basically being like this guy needs to be considered at a higher level. This would be an example of that. That will get announced here in a couple days. But Colt Keith, the Silver Slugger nomination. Second base is different from the outfield, but did either one of those nominations give you a little bit more, I don't want to say surprised, because they obviously had good seasons, but it's sort of like, because for me, it was Keith. I was like, okay. But outfield's pretty deep, so Green getting in there is obviously a great honor as well.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised that Colt Keith was nominated. Not that he, had a poor season or anything. I mean, he had the rough start and then performed pretty well after that. Although at some point we're going to have to talk about his slow finish to the season because he really seemed to hit a wall there. But just then you look at American League second baseman, and it's not hard to be reminded that there are not a ton of great candidates. There's Jose Altuve and there's Marcus Semien, who had a down year himself. And then if you start looking for a third, you could dock yourself into Gleyber Torres or Andres Jimenez or Michael Massey. And it's like, well, Colt has as good of a resume for a Silver Slugger as any of them, which really speaks to, I think, the weakness of the second base position in the American League. Look, and Colt's not going to win it this year, but definitely makes you think, okay, if he can stick at second base, if he can build on the defensive improvements we saw later in the season, he could certainly win this award in the future. I think it's a surprise he got this nomination, but it does kind of remind you of one of the reasons probably why the Tigers have seemed intent on him remaining at second base. He could be a perennial Silver Slugger winner, if he plays even league slightly below average defense. I mean, he could be a 4+ win player. This is just one more kind of insight and be like, oh yeah, I guess maybe their line of thinking does make some level of sense in that regard.
Yeah, and sticking with Keith here for a second, because I think we all know Riley Green's credentials and his potential, and how I don't think 24 home runs is his ceiling. With Colt Keith, what was it, like 40-something games that he went before he hit his first career home run, something like that? And you say he kind of hit a wall there, which is true, but then you look at the macro. He was 272 batting average over his last 102 games. So
pretty good.
That's pretty good. This is a guy who had, I would say, about as full a rookie year as somebody could possibly have. You start out with the extension. You make your major league debut. You're playing I don't want to say new position, but a you're committed to a position for the first time over there at second base. You work very hard about changing your body. You go through rookie struggles. There's people calling for whether you should be sent down. And then you kind of kick it into gear. You help this team, because I was reading the quote from his contract extension press release. He's like, I want to be the best player I can be and help the Tigers win a World Series, which is obviously cliche as cliche goes, right? However, that was like, if you wanted to say, is he on track for that? Technically, you would have to say yes, because he was a Silver Slugger nominee, made some impressive plays at second base. He didn't come without his struggles, but there were times where I was like, all right, Keith, I think he did get better over the course of the year defensively. I thought his hands got better at the turn over the course of the year. And then he helped the team make it to the second round of the playoffs within, 7-8 outs or whatever of the ALCS. So it's like, kind of on the right track. But it brings me to the contract, because it's been a while, Cody, and I don't know when the last time you looked at it is, but it's been a while since I really looked at the contract extension that he signed in January. And I was looking at it, I was like, man, I mean, good on him. He got cash. But now we're looking at, if you want to be on pace guy is like, he's looking to be one of the better bargains in baseball, because in 2025, he's going to make $3.5 million. Then it's $4 million. Then it's $4 million again. Then it's $5 million. Then it's $5 million again. And now we're to 2030. And then it's 10 million, 13 million, 15 million with some incentives that will be kicked back there, if I read this correctly, kicked back at the end there. So he's not making more than $5 million in a season until 2030. 2030. And at that time, he's going to be 28 years old. There's I think we could probably say this is already looking like a bargain. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it always looked like a bargain, and now that we've seen a full year of Keith in the big leagues, it definitely looks like a bargain. Fangraphs has a dollar per WAR metric. One win above replacement on the open market is still worth roughly $8 million. So according to Fangraphs, Colt Keith was worth $14.4 million this past season. That's playing poor defense for a lot of the year, depending on your metric of choice, and really struggling for his first month plus in the big leagues. He's worth $14.4 million. Now, important to remember, if Colt Keith hadn't signed this deal, he would be making the league minimum for, last year and the next 2 years, as he was pre-arb. So he's getting more money in his pockets, but it does remind you, in theory, his value is only going to rise over the next few years. There's some security in the contract and the years. Like, what if he gets hurt? What if he moves to first base and the bat doesn't quite fully play there? Like, maybe he's not going to be this $30 million player, and the contract does kind of account for that. At the same time, I always felt this, the contract just kind of, there's a very limited ceiling on that. Like, I don't blame Colt for taking his money and taking the security, but I think especially maybe those option years at the back end, like, I would have wanted to see a higher AAV there on the end of that. There's a guy who's not only is he not going to make more than 10 million, he's not going to make more than 15 million ever, under the terms of this deal. And if you are a subscriber to, dollars per WAR, he's already worth almost 15 million. Starting to look like a great play from the Tigers. And, I always said this, I'm sure Colt Keith was happy the day he signed that contract. How long until he starts thinking like, so-and-so is making this and so-and-so is making this, and I'm only making this. I mean, I think a lot of people do that in their jobs, right? You sign a contract and you feel good about it, and then you start thinking, oh, well, what if I would have asked for X? Or, you start looking around the office and you think, oh, that person makes more than me? Like, I don't know about that. And you definitely do wonder if Colt Keith will feel that way in a couple years.
Do you have a grasp of his, what kind of player he projects to be? Because again, you look at his numbers this year, he's a Silver Slugger nominee. So we understand that, we're talking about that. However, it is second base, and it seems like he's still a guy that we're going to be looking for. Where's his actual real fit? in the field, because like I said, he was a prep third baseman. He played both, coming up. He ends up at second base. There's always can anybody, is anybody going to play first base? Is anybody going to be a valuable first baseman, I should say? I think at certain points, some people have been like, is he maybe better in a corner outfield? I think there's some arm concerns there, shoulder concerns there.
Yeah, I don't think he's playing the outfield anytime soon.
So, yeah, exactly. So it got me thinking a little bit. I was like, he did make 12 starts at DH this year. Like, are we looking at like a 28, like when he's 28, when he's 27, are we looking at maybe he's like you would think, hopefully he'd have to get better, but a mashing DH type left-handed, because again, like the salary is still probably going to be to the what you would pay for a DH at that time, outside of these, higher end guys that are super expensive. The Tigers never going after Juan Soto. So like, like, where is his place? Because I was looking at it, I was like, what if he just becomes a DH and you're still not paying him all that much? I don't know. I was just kind of kicking around theories 4 years from now that are completely valueless.
Yeah, that's a lot to speculate on. If Colt Keith Colt Keith, we don't know AJ Hinch's contract, but I think Colt Keith is going to slightly outdo him there. But as long as AJ Hinch is the manager, I don't think there's going to be such thing as the DH. I don't know. People in the Tigers front office right now already believe in his defense at second. I think he's probably eventually a better fit at first, but whatever. They're going to make do the second base thing probably for as long as they can, and then we're talking 3-4 years out. Who knows what the state of the organization is? I'm just going to say, like, there's not much value in having a guy be DH only unless he's truly like unplayable in the field, and you better be Yordan Alvarez at the plate. So I'm going to go ahead and say if Colt Keith is the DH in 4 years, that probably means he is an even better monster at the plate than we ever thought. Like, that's just how high the bar would have to be there for his bat to even remotely like justify that kind of, pegging him to, hey, you're only a DH.
And I'll say this, part of my motivation for even like thinking that is basically like respect for the caliber of prospect with middle infield options that the Tigers have been bolstering in their farm system. So I think it might be a conversation that will eventually be had. That's all. Like,
Yeah. And worth remembering, like a year ago, it's like, oh, it's Colt Keith, the second baseman in the future. And now we're like, oh, how do we move this guy off second base? Like, prospect conversations they're interesting, they're fun, but they are often just ridiculous because we don't know what's going to happen. And right now, everyone thinks Kevin McGonigal is going to be the greatest player of all time. And look, I think his bat's real and he's going to have a bright future. But like, remember when Jace Young, like, I don't know, like these guys come up and it's like, oh, okay, they're pretty good, but they're not stars. And you're always looking for the next superstar. And how many true superstars are there in the sport? Like not that many. Not a lot of these guys reach the ceilings we can hold for them in our minds when they're hitting 330 in AA or whatever.
So we'll go from prospects speculation to free agent speculation. Speaking of Scott Boras, he did lay, he's going to bat for his clients, which is what he's supposed to do. And he's got a big one in Juan Soto, and he's got quite a pretty interesting one in Alex Bregman as well. Scott letting it slip that, he could play second base, right? Bregman, he could play second base. So the Bregman thing is something that hangs over the Tigers' head until he signs, because of just like the Correa stuff from a couple years ago, obvious need, ties to AJ, and the desire to make this team into a winner. So you take from a winning culture. Now you could argue that that third one is more about over the top as opposed to just like create a winning culture. So, like, for whatever that's worth. But Bregman is going to be the interesting name because even though those things I just said, the ties to the Tigers, there's not a lot of people that are predicting that he will sign with the Tigers. I see Yankees. I see Nationals. I see him. A lot of people think he's coming back to Houston, which, if he did that, that'd be fine or whatever. I think it was they let him go out into the field for the last home game by himself as sort of like his like curtain call, because it seemed like everybody thought he was going to leave. So then if he came back, that cool moment renders itself pointless. But The Athletic, Cody, your great colleagues over The Athletic, you should subscribe so you can read all of Cody's great work and all of his great colleagues. Project Bregman at 7 years, $189 million. So go back to the age thing like I always like to do. He is going to be 31 basically on opening day. So how does that land for you? Do you have any other sort of like inklings on what would be the right move given that number? Alex Bregman, 7 for 189.
7 for 189. Something about it just seems like more than the Tigers are going to want to pay. I guess I don't know that, but and it was interesting. Houston at one point seemed to have been written off. Like, as you said, okay, he's done there. And if anyone's commented strongly on it, I think it's been the Astros and Dana Brown and Jim Crane. There seems like they want to make a competitive offer to bring him back. So if they do that, that could spark a little bit of a bidding war. Are the Yankees going to outbid? Are the Mets or whoever else going to get in on this? And if so, where does that leave the Tigers? That means they better really sell their culture, and he better really want to go play for AJ Hinch, and he better really want to go play in a park that's not great for home run hitters in bad weather. There's a lot going on here. And if the Tigers aren't going to have the most lucrative offer, it's going to be an uphill battle. And I think that's why you're not seeing him like predicted, in addition to Scott Harris, who's still been very we still don't really have any idea how much, if at all, they're willing to spend. GM meetings came and went, and we didn't really garner any new insight into like what end of the market they're going to be fishing in. Like we don't know. But then I also think about it like this: if the Tigers just said F it and added to their payroll and did a good sales pitch, and they signed Alex Bregman and Christian Walker, would they not be AL Central favorites? I think they would be. So you can talk yourself into just no, you have a good foundation. You need to add a lot more bats, be aggressive, go get those bats, go make the playoffs, go be for real. And does that necessarily set back the franchise? I am not sold that it does. Now, I think it would be realistically, I think the Tigers should get one hitter of kind of this caliber. And I have a hard time thinking that's going to be Bregman. But sometimes I think maybe it should be Alex Bregman.
That's a good way to put it. It should be. I like I like it for all the obvious reasons, but it's hard for me to get over that mental hurdle of thinking that it's going to happen, which is something that I can speak for myself here. Like every time you have some kind of conversation about the Tigers, like everyone expects the spending of the Mike Ilitch era, and I have to be like, yeah, it would be great to go after Bregman or Soto. I have no evidence to say that that's going to happen, so I almost kind of leave it out of my mind. Something that would be attention grabbing and cheap relative would be if the Tigers made a play for, let me see if I get this right without only reading it, without actually hearing it, Roki Sasaki.
Pretty straightforward one, right? Yeah,
I hope so. But I just want in case I get it wrong. The latest pitching sensation from Japan. He is expected to be posted. He is not physically posted yet. I tried to read up all these rules and the rabbit holes and deadlines or whatever. It seems like, in layman's terms, this is not going to be a flat out bidding war because he will have to be signed via international bonus pool cash available. So it's not like Yamamoto last year where it's just literally who's the highest bidder or whatever. You would have to sell him on the environment. It's not going to be a dollars and cents thing because more or less a lot of teams are going to be able to offer similar. But the Tigers are going to have almost as much money as anybody, if I read this correctly, available to them to try to make a move like that. And he's young. He's basically free, considering what he would do for interest, tickets, TV revenue, all that stuff. I see no reason why the Tigers should make a play like this, because this seems like a market that you can better understand and thus invest with more confidence. And so I like the idea. This kind of seems like outside the box approach, because remember, the Tigers were linked to last year, and that wasn't really true, but it was out there. So I don't know. This feels like maybe Scott Harris, like this could be like a trick up the sleeve Scott Harris style, going after Sasaki. So, and they do have, obviously Maeda under contract right now. That can help with any transition. That can be part of your sales pitch, right? So I think they would have at least a compelling case to Sasaki if they wanted to go down this route.
Yeah, I think someone put this on Twitter, but like all 30 teams should be on Roki Sasaki. He's going to sign for probably somewhere, if I understand this and all the rules that are ridiculous correctly, between like 5.1 and $7.6 million. And every team has somewhere in that range in their international bonus pool. So why would you not make a play for Roki Sasaki? And then it becomes like, okay, what do you actually have to pitch to this person? The Tigers, I guess they have certainly their success with pitchers and their ability to optimize pitchers and playing in what's a little bit overblown to call it a pitcher's park, but a park that can be friendly to pitchers. So there's something that can to I think one of the most ridiculous overblown stories of last offseason was like, oh, adding Kenta Maeda is going to open up the Tigers pipeline to Japan. Like, I don't really know how much there is in that. I guess if he wants to ask Kenta how are things going in Detroit, he can. And I have no idea if Kenta likes the city or not, but Kenta might be like, well, I came here and it's not working out so hot for me. So I'm not sure that helps you. At the same time, Sasaki seems to have incredible stuff. Not a perfect, not a finished product, but Saris did a great breakdown if you want to know more about his arsenal on The Athletic. Really good fastball. The velo actually ticked down a little bit last year, which is odd. Nasty splitter. We know Scott Harris likes the platoon neutral splitters. A slider that's pretty good, but maybe has some room to further improve. Super high ceiling with this guy. So yeah, every team should make a play. I'd like it a lot more than if you were to wait a couple years and you had to bid $300+ million for an international pitcher, which is always a little bit of a gamble. So look, I hope the Tigers make a run at him, but I would say like the idea that, they're going to get Sasaki because Kenta Maeda is here. Like, I think that's kind of a ridiculous storyline.
Sure. But like, it'd be one of those things where like, if he was looking for a place where he could have a mentor, like that would be sure. Again, just part of the sales pitch, not necessarily like the pipeline thing or whatever, but, it would be fascinating. It'd be fascinating if they kind of try to go that route. Cause like I said, it's you're getting a bargain based on his talent. Now, maybe he comes to America and he stinks, but like based on his talent and his profile, and we saw him in the World Baseball Classic, like you would be getting a bargain. And right. You're probably never going to get, I say never, but you're highly unlikely to get a player of his talent and hype for that price point. So like, you're right. Every team.
I like Sasaki going this route. It seems to me that this is what you do if you just really want to play in the majors and you want to bet on yourself a little bit. This is what Shohei Ohtani did, going this route where he signed as Shohei Ohtani signed a minor league deal as an international amateur rather than the full out posting bidding war. And obviously it's worked out okay for Mr. Ohtani in the financial realm. But I do think Sasaki is an interesting target for another reason that we've already seen kind of a lot happen in the pitching market early this winter. Just a couple weeks ago, I pitched Nick Pivetta as a great fit for the Tigers. And turned out the Red Sox offered him a qualifying offer, which was a little bit surprising, I think, to some people in Boston circles. But basically what this means, the Tigers would have to forfeit a draft pick if they were to sign a player who rejects a qualifying offer. Several other pitchers who I think made a lot of sense for the Tigers, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, who they were interested in last offseason, Nick Martinez. All these guys are going to come with qualifying offers attached to them. the Tiger, a qualifying offer should not necessarily preclude the Tigers from signing a free agent like Alex Bregman's, but consider that if you sign two free agents who have a qualifying offer attached to them, you're forfeiting, I believe, your third and fourth highest draft pick. The Tigers would as a revenue sharing team. Based on how Scott Harris seems to approach the draft, I just don't see them doing that. I think it would be well worth forfeiting your third or whatever highest draft pick for a hitter of the Alex Bregman, Christian Walker ilk. I'm not sure I would do it for Nick Pivetta, right? So it makes you wonder if some of these pitchers are already crossed off the list. Interestingly enough, a guy who did not receive a qualifying offer, one Walker Buehler of the Dodgers, who I thought would and who I thought maybe would take it. The fact he didn't, I think that door just got a lot more open for Detroit, although I'm still not sold Buehler's only going to sign a one-year deal, whatever ends up happening with him. But I think the Buehler thing looks a lot more realistic than it did a couple weeks ago. And you could argue it strengthens the reason for all 30 teams to get in on Roki Sasaki. This guy might be the best value if some of your other targets have a qualifying offer attached to him. Like, that doesn't, again, shouldn't necessarily preclude them from being signed, but I think it just lowers the interest level, maybe lowers the total dollar value you're now willing to attach to that contract. So already some really interesting dominoes beginning to fall in the pitching market.
Very true, and I tend to think Scott Harris is going to be clinging to those draft picks. Probably as a general purpose, he would probably also say that the team is not accomplished or good enough to negate those picks or whatever as part of the overall building of the team. Maybe you make like a real ALCS run, you go to game 7 or something like that. It's like you just need this over the top. That might preclude it, but like I feel like he's gonna keep those options open. And also if you're him and you're the front office, you think, well, we can get 7/8 out of player X that we would get out of Nick Martinez or whatever. So we're just gonna go to player X and save the draft picks. So
that's exactly how they're gonna think.
Yeah. All right, Cody, anything else before we jet out of here?
No, we are all good. Stay tuned. We are scheduled to have Tigers manager AJ Hinch on our next episode, which should come out Thursday.
So if you want to hear AJ Hinch, what you got to do is you got to subscribe to Tiger Territory, wherever you get your podcasts, and then subscribe to us on YouTube as well, Tiger Territory, in order to see our interview with one AJ Hinch. So if you're watching this on YouTube right now, go hit that little subscribe button. You probably haven't clicked it yet. Just give it a little click. That actually really helps us out. It's a little dopamine when you do that. You get the get the notification bell too or whatever. It makes you feel good. It helps us out as we grow the show in this new venture, Tiger Territory, as a part of the Bow Territory Network. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great week.